webinar, and we will record this session in case you have to step out early. And also we make this available to people that sign up and can't make it. So just be aware of that. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So you have any questions about your branding or any other marketing related items, we'd love to hear from you. We really want to get you the most value out of these sessions as possible. And so if you have any questions in between, please put them in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the question while we're discussing a topic. So. Okay, so let's get started here. So we're going to have a discussion about branding and how you can actually stand out because of your branding with your small business. So this is a topic that is a lot of people talk about branding, but from my own experience, it's not always clear exactly what they mean with branding. So there's a lot of different definitions out there. So today we want to kind of discuss, how we look at branding as Edge and how we work with clients on that. And hopefully get some more clarification for you to apply this to your own situation. So with that, we can get started. So I'm going to introduce you to two key team members here that will be doing some of the presenting here. So we have Caitlin on top, and most of you have already met her. Her role at Edge is she's the content strategist, and she also does a lot of the strategy when it comes to the branding and messaging. So she'll be taking a part of this presentation. And then we have our very own graphic designer, genius, Peter Luang, and he's joining us as well. And so he'll be talking about branding from a more practical point of view. How do you actually put together a brand, and what are some of the things to think about? So Katie, I'm gonna hand it over to you now, and then we can answer any questions that you have along the way.
All right, so as Peter already kind of mentioned, often the problem with branding or brands is you're not clearly describing what you have to offer, and you're attracting the wrong type of customers. And that often has to do with how branding is defined, just because there's so many different definitions of branding out there. That's kind of confusing and kind of muddles up your own branding, whether it's defining what elements are included in your branding, how you create your branding, and stuff like that. So we'll be covering all kind of the solutions in this webinar today. So basically you have 7 seconds to make an impression, whether good or bad, on someone who's just coming across your brand. So that first impression is so important. It really has to be able to create hopefully a positive input on your new audience members, and then hopefully to get them to kind of learn more about your business. That's kind of intriguing enough for them as well.
So Katie, maybe just a question for the audience here. Like, is anybody brave enough to share their definition of branding? Like, when you hear the word branding, what do you think about? So if you can either use your mic or you can put it in the chat box.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is always like the logo, and then like the look that you're like presenting to people. Are you like serious, corporate-y, or are you more fun? But yeah, I'm here to learn. So you tell me.
Yeah, no, that's a very good definition, I think, Stuart, because a lot of people, I think, identify the brand with the logo, right? And so it's generally more than that, but that's what people can actually touch and see, right? So that's why a lot of the discussion when you talk about branding quickly goes into the actual developing of the graphics, whereas the better way of looking at a brand is oftentimes actually, coming up with a strategy first before you actually start designing anything, to make sure it really fits with your audience and the product or service that you provide. So it is definitely a good start, but it's not the whole story. So thanks for sharing that. Anybody else?
The logo tends to be like the encapsulation of all the different branding elements. So like there's lots of things that go into your brand, but the logo typically is meant to be like the face of your brand, right? But it's not the whole thing.
No, exactly. It's more extensive than that. So yeah. Thanks, Peter, for adding to that. Anybody else from the audience?
So it also includes, you know, things like slogans and reputation and quality of manufacturing, level of quality. Like that could be, you know, the cheapest service in town, or it could be, you know, premium. So.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. Yeah, it's very true. Like your brand also needs to match up with your marketing or your business strategy, right? So if you're a low cost provider, then of course your logo should communicate that. And if you're high end, you know, like a high end luxury brand has a complete different requirements for their brand than a, you know, low cost provider. For example, the Superstore, their no name brand is a really good example of that, right? Like it looks, from a branding, for like Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but from a design point of view, it looks terrible. Like it's black and yellow, and it used Helvetica as the main font. But I think it's super effective because it communicates what the brand stands for. So thanks for adding to that, Jeff. Anybody else before we kind of get into a bit more details here? It's always good to kind of get your feedback and see where you're at with some of these things. If not, we'll just continue on. Yeah, so I already mentioned this before, but we really believe that strategy is the basis of everything you do with your brand, but also with your marketing, of course. So coming up with a brand without thinking through who your audience is, you know, the messaging about your brand, like what position you take in the market. Are you a high-end provider or like a low-cost leader? All these things need to be discussed before, you know, somebody like Peter can actually get to work and actually start working on some of these graphics. So these are the 7 areas of marketing that we work in, and we believe every business should touch on these things. I won't go in detail on any of this, but your brand touches all these different areas, because guess what? Like your website will have your branding on it. A printed piece will have your branding on it. If you do paid advertising campaigns, it'll have your branding on it, right? So the repetition of that brand, like once you have established it, it'll actually make all these things a lot easier to implement as well. So and get that consistency. So whenever somebody is interacting with you as a business, they always get the same impression, and it's consistent. And that's kind of the power of branding.
So what we kind of wanted to touch on is what could be going wrong with your branding if you feel that it's not being as effective with your audience. So there's several issues that could be going wrong with an ineffective brand. So you're either attracting the wrong customers, creating a lack of trust, saying you don't care how your brand looks, so you don't care about your clients. There's also relaying that what you have to offer is poor quality, like either your products or services. Whether you have probably the best quality product in the world, if your brand doesn't match that same quality, it's going to reflect poorly on your business overall. So then you're going to have either limited or no awareness about your business. So if people aren't able to instantly recognize your business and instantly connect with it through your brand, that's going to create a lot of limitations on regards to the growth you can have as a business and as your brand. And then you're going to have reduced engagement with your audience. So they're just going to see you and then say bye. They're not going to want to kind of like stick around to learn more or kind of interact with you through your social media, your emails, or any other kind of marketing that you're using. So we kind of covered the side effects of your ineffective brand. There are different reasons why a brand might be ineffective. But these are just some of the things that we kind of understand that may be causing an ineffective branding. So as Peter already kind of touched on, a brand that isn't based on strategy isn't going to be as effective. You're just kind of pulling things out of thin air, isn't going to be able to create an effective brand for your company.
Yeah, and one thing I can add to that is like oftentimes what I've seen in my lifetime being involved in small businesses, that a brand or a logo or even a name gets established in as kind of a fluke oftentimes, right? Like you're starting out your business just by yourself. Eventually, in some cases, it grows into a relatively large business. But in some cases, people are stuck with a brand name or like a brand as a whole that no longer, that doesn't really reflect what they do. So if you are, I know a few people on this call are just in the early stages of setting up their business. It's so important to actually get it right from the start, because that will save you so much time and money later on, of course, because once you start lettering your trucks and your building and your promotional materials, like a brand update or like a change of name is a significant exercise for you, right? So whatever you can do before you get going, within certain limitations, of course, you don't have to overthink it either, but just think it through properly and come up with something that you can really work with. And that's also, you're able to grow with as well. And I've seen even some local examples that of names and brands that actually, they made a lot of sense 15 years ago, but not so much today.
Yeah, definitely. And so the next point kind of touches on what we were saying before, the definition of a brand. It can complicate how you create your brand. If it's not properly defined, you're not able to kind of address all the elements and tie them all together, whether it's your messaging, your tone, the imagery, like your logo or the graphics or icons that are created. If they don't all tie together and are not cohesive, they might cause an ineffective brand. And then also, if kind of touching on that point, if they don't tie together, if they're inconsistent, if you're constantly changing out different aspects of your brand, it doesn't look put together or sound the same. It can cause confusion within your audience and cause them to kind of like, is this the same company that I'm dealing with, or is this a different one? So just having a consistent look and feel across every aspect of your brand is very important.
I think the consistency thing is a really big point, because it speaks to the level of professionals. And if you look at big brands, you often feel like you're getting hammered by the same message over and over again, but that's exactly what they want. They want you to associate that message with their logo, with their imagery. And I think if you can consistently put out the same message and the same look, it just speaks to the professionalism that you care about your message, and you care about how you're portrayed to your audience. And I think that's a very important thing. Consistency is key with branding.
So again, kind of touching on the inconsistency in your brand, if you change your branding up too much, doesn't allow it to kind of settle into your audience's brains, it can again cause confusion, kind of questioning what's going on with this company, that they're constantly changing their brand and constantly wondering whether they should be able to trust a company that is constantly making these changes just to their brand. What else in their company are they making changes to? And then again, another point, not having everyone follow the guidelines, whether it's someone that's in your marketing team or someone that's kind of just a little lower level. You want to make sure everyone follows the guidelines, whether it's in the email signatures that they send out, your social media, your email campaigns, your website. You want to make sure everyone is following the same guidelines to maintain consistency across your whole.
Katie, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
No, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, I was just going to make a point on the change too frequently point as well. yeah, like if you're constantly changing your brand, I guess the whole point of a brand is to build recognition with your audience, so that when they see your truck drive by, they can look at your, you know, side panel and see your logo, and within half a second be like, oh, that's this truck or that truck. Same goes for like business cards and flyers and brochures and any other print material. The goal is to have easy recognition very fast, right? So yeah, people automatically know your message and know that you're there. If you change it, you know, you're losing all that recognition you've built up. So it's, you know, we do major rebrands from time to time, but a lot of times it's good to change it up like incrementally instead of one big fell swoop, if you will.
Yeah, no, excellent point, Peter. And if you look at the big companies, like for example, RBC comes to mind, Royal Bank, they've updated their logo over the years. But if you go back even like 80 or 100 years even back, it still has a similar idea behind the logo. It's just a more modernized version of that logo. So that's a smart strategy as well, especially if you have, you know, like somebody like RBC has literally millions of dollars invested in their brand, right? So it's a really important asset. And even in the small business level, like if you can get this branding piece right, some of our clients, they've been around for a long time and they're thinking about exiting the business, right? Are they trying to sell the business at some point? If you get this branding piece right, you're adding value to your business. There's no doubt about it. Just because, you know, like you're seen as a professional and it's easy to interact with you, and you can really, you know, benefit from that in the long run. One more thing I wanted to add to the guidelines, like some larger companies, they'll have a brand guideline that's probably like 20 or 30 pages long. For small businesses, we don't necessarily think that's what you need. But if you working with a graphic designer or somebody that develops that logo for you today, you know, they may or may not be around 10 years from now, right? Or 5 years from now. So it's really smart to get at least maybe, I think, Peter, we generally give them a one page or just with the colors. So if you go to a print shop now, you actually have the correct colors that were intended. It'll have the fonts, like the letter styles. There's a few of those elements on how to use the logo. That's really, as a small business, I think all you need. Am I correct, Peter?
Yeah, at least the basics, right? Just so, you know, you don't send every single thing you put out to your graphic designer. A lot of the stuff gets done in-house. People might put together their own letterheads or even their own flyers or whatnot. So it's important that the elements get used properly and consistently. Even if it's, you know, if you send it to your professional graphic designer, they'll do a lot of that stuff automatically. They'll just know the brand and know what goes where and how it should be used. But then, you know, your secretary in your office might not be using the logo properly, and it can degrade the look of your branded elements if it's used incorrectly.
Yeah, no, good point. Like again, like the famous franchises, just like McDonald's, they have basically what is referred to as the brand police, right? There's a whole department working on making sure that the consistency is adhered to by everybody. So yeah, good points. Any questions so far that anybody wants to throw out there? If not, we'll just continue on, Katie. I'll keep my eyes on this chat box here, guys.
Perfect. So again, we're coming back to what is a brand. So one of the most important things to start off with is defining what a brand is, just because there's so many different elements that fall into what your brand is. And sometimes people only kind of attribute brand to the visual aspects of your company, when in actuality, it's your messaging, it's your tone, it's the content you create, as well as the graphics, your logo, the font, any icons or photos that you often use in your print work. So by defining what a brand is, first, you kind of know what elements you need to tackle when creating your brand. So again, yeah, just the problem with branding is that people, there are inconsistent definitions of what a brand is, what it should incorporate. So by kind of defining all the elements within a brand, kind of based on what we view as what a brand is, and then also kind of defining what it means for your business is going to be beneficial when you kind of start creating those elements. So with Edge, as I kind of said, there are different elements that we kind of define as what encompasses the term brand. So this is your name, logo, colors, fonts, imagery, your messaging, brand voice, any vocabulary that you choose to use. So by encompassing all these elements and having a consistent tie between them is going to help you stand out from your competition, as well as to attract the right customers to your business.
Mm. Yeah, very good point. And I think to add to that, like the very first one, the name of your business, that's again, it's a very important decision that you make. And I've seen so many times that that's the decision that's made like overnight, and I can kind of relate to that. I probably named a couple of my businesses as a fluke, and it kind of worked out. But if you have if you have some knowledge about this area, and even if you spend a little bit of time thinking through, you know, like who it is you are appealing to, for example, and the service you provide, keep in mind that really large companies can get away oftentimes with really funky names that don't really mean anything, right? Or they have a mythical, far away kind of meaning to somebody, and that works. But they also spend billions of dollars on advertising. I'm thinking Nike, for example, right? There's an idea behind the brand Nike, and of course over time people have learned it. But if you ask the average person that buys their product what it exactly means, nobody really knows, right? So for a small business, you don't have billions of dollars or even millions of dollars to spend on this, right? So choosing a sensible name that actually, in my opinion, oftentimes describes what you're doing makes it really a lot easier to do all the other branding things as well. Because if you choose something that makes sense to only you and not your audience, you're going to have to spend a lot more effort explaining every time what it is you do, right? So again, a little tip there, when the very first thing you do is to establish a good name for your business.
So again, these are in no particular order in how they should be created. They're just elements that you should consider when creating your brand. And so now that we know the why, we're going to get into the how of creating an effective brand. So there are several steps that to creating an effective brand that all, as we had kind of previously mentioned, start with strategy. So the first step when creating an effective brand is defining your objective. What do you want your brand to accomplish when you create it? Do you want it to boost brand awareness, expand your customer base, increase your customer retention, build up your authority within the industry, or do you want to simply promote your products to a new audience? So by defining what you want your brand to do, it kind of helps guide you along the process. So the next step in creating an effective brand is determining your target audience. While it may be your brand, it is intended to appeal to your audience. So what may be attractive to you when it comes to visuals in your brand might not be appealing to the ideal person that you're trying to attract with your brand. So your brand should target and appeal to your ideal customer. So the way to do that is to develop customer personas. So these are basically caricatures of who you kind of picture as your ideal audience. So this kind of involves like, what industry do they work in? What is their role within the company? What kind of pain points are they experiencing? Like, why are they kind of looking for your product or service? And then also kind of their decision criteria, what's going to make them kind of choose you over your competitors. And the next step in creating an effective brand is reviewing your competitors. So by reviewing what your competitors are already doing, you can identify their weaknesses and strengths, and then fill in those gaps with your own branding. So the importance of branding is to simply stand out from your competitors. You don't want to be doing exactly what your competitors are doing. So by looking at what they're already doing, you are able to not only not mimic what they're doing, but also kind of fill in those gaps where they might have weaknesses and kind of make it a strength for your brand.
And that ties back to the naming again as well. Like once you do some competitive research, you'll find out what some of the other players in the market, what names they have. And that kind of guides your decision as well to be different, but also to be, and oftentimes be more clear about what it is you do. Any questions so far? I'll just continuing on.
And so the next step is defining what makes you unique. So again, once you've kind of looked at what your competitors are doing when it comes to their brand, you kind of want to lay out what benefits your company offers that kind of make you unique. Whether it's some value-added services, what do you kind of do that kind of goes above and beyond your products and services? Does your product have a unique feature that your competitors don't offer? So by defining what makes you unique, you can kind of target that within your brand. And so the next step in creating an effective brand is, again, as we kind of mentioned, is creating elements that are beyond just the visual aspects. So that's creating your core message. So your core message should clearly describe what you do and address your customers' problems and provide the solutions that your company provides. So your customer has 3 questions when it's kind of starting to get to know you or kind of looking for someone similar to you. Do you understand my problem? Do you have a solution to my problem? And what will my life look like after I use your product or service? So your core message should simply, again, address your problem, their problem, your solution to that, and what life will look like for them as a success. So yeah, go ahead, Peter. Yeah.
Okay, no, I was just going to say that this is kind of at the core of your marketing strategy. Like when we talk about marketing strategy, again, there's a lot of different definitions and ways people arrive on a strategy for their company or organization. But these 3 things are really what it comes down to. And what we see a lot of mistake that we see a lot of businesses make is they talk about themselves more than they talk about the problem that they solve. So this goes way beyond just the visuals again, but it's really important to understand this. Like once you understand what the problem is you're actually solving, and you use that in all your communication, written, visual, anything you do, that's really, really powerful, because that's the only thing, like with all the different information that comes at us every day, that's really only the thing that we're interested in. Like, can you solve my problem? And how do you solve it? How do you solve it better than anybody else? And what is it? What is the effect? What's in it for me? That's really what it comes down to. So if you can keep those 3 things straight, you have the beginning of a really powerful marketing strategy as well, in addition to actually a very good foundation for your brand.
So this is just an example of a core message that we have developed for Edge. So we kind of pinpoint what is often an issue for our clients, just lack of visibility and the desire to grow their business. So our solution to that problem is creating websites that not only look great, but also attract more customers. So it's just a very simple 1 or 2 lines that are able to, we kind of said, identify the problem, solution, right then and there for them to easily find. And so next, once you have the messaging in place, you can develop your brand voice. So how do you want to sound throughout your content? You want always to be consistent with your tone of voice through all the content that you send out. As we kind of mentioned before, consistency is key when developing a brand, and that applies to your brand voice. So do you want to sound professional, or do you want to use a more casual tone? when you're addressing your audience. Do you use more technical language, or do you kind of slip in some slang words in there? So by kind of defining what your brand tone is, you can also kind of guide your content, whether it's online or in print. So it's definitely important to develop that brand voice there. So again, there's different types of brand voices that you can develop. So it's all kind of based on your personal business.
Yeah, and again, some organizations actually create a style guide that will help them with content creation, and that talks about some of these things. So even if you work with an external team or somebody else to do some of your writing, they can understand better what the brand is all about when it comes to actually describing things and what the tone of voice is, like what Katie said. So there's quite you don't have to be a huge company to do that. Like if a big part of your marketing strategy is content, which it probably should be in today's world, it's actually a fairly helpful document. And Katie, I'm just thinking maybe we could provide a sample of that as well at some point if people are interested.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so you can kind of see from these examples here that your brand voice can be used in things as large as white papers or something as small as a 404 Aero page. So just this kind of example from Pixar is kind of a more kind of fun, casual tone that they're using. And even with the Edges 404 page, we kind of use more of the casual tone just to kind of feel a little bit more welcoming to our visitors. So it can be used in your brand voice can be used in any aspect of your branding.
All right. How to create an effective brand. Create your visual assets. Let strategy and the previous steps guide you. I think that's important. The strategy is really like the crux of your marketing or your branding efforts, I should say. Everything you do with regards to your messaging and your visuals and your logo is all put out through the lens of who am I appealing to? What's my target audience? What's my business like, right? You have to take all those things into account before you put your logo together. A lot of people come up with cool ideas for logos that look sweet, but they don't really have any strategy behind it. I think that's a mistake. You should really be trying to target your audience because they might think or feel differently than you do. And your brand is more than just your logo. It's you want to take into account the colors that you use, right? When I'm designing brochures, logos, I go into color psychology. I pick colors specifically that I think will represent the brand well and appeal to the audience and send a positive message for things, for something like an accounting firm, you might use a more trustworthy color like blue or green because green has positive financial connotations and blue is a very trusting color. You wouldn't use something like red necessarily because red is very volatile and unpredictable. So you have to think about all those things and font styles too, right? Every font is different and they tell, they give off a different vibe. You might use a serif font with the little arms on the end of the sticks for something a little bit more of an academic look or something a bit more serious or traditional. Whereas, if you use the dreaded Comic Sans, it's more playful and less serious, if you will, maybe more approachable. I don't think I would ever use Comic Sans, but
well, you never say never, Peter.
No, I won't.
But you bring up a good point. Like a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, they're entrepreneurs because they are, they're going places, right? They have ideas. They're full of ideas. What we see in some cases, they have great ideas, but it really makes a lot of sense to talk to a professional like Peter or any other graphic person to actually filter that idea to some of the things that Peter talked about. Like your typography really speaks volumes about your business. And if you look at the big brands, they spend a tremendous amount of time just picking just the right font, or in some cases actually develop their own fonts. Going back to the McDonald's example, they've actually invented or trademark their own writing style, so nobody else can take it. First of all, but also because it really uniquely fits with what they're trying to do. So,
and I think also too is that people can recognize certain fonts. You might not be able to pick out the name of an exact font. You might be able to say, I've seen that font before. I know that as a graphic designer, I work with fonts every day, and I can look at an ad and I can say that's, you know, Barlow. I can say that's Times New Roman. I can say, you just have an eye for these things, I think, innately. And yeah, a company like McDonald's will be able to create their own, and when people see that font, they can associate that with just McDonald's and McDonald's alone. So that would be the purpose behind them developing their own font. Yeah. And we put up an example there on the screen of some of the print pieces that we've done, well, and also the website in tablet format. But you can kind of see how we use the messaging in the different pieces, a slightly different look and feel on each, but the overall look is the same, right? We might use a certain style of picture, you know, for the home page, but it all looks and fits within the same brand. And consistency, we have on the brochure there, we have some of the icons that we used on the website and on the banner, and the messaging is all the same. So you can kind of get an idea of how we use it in-house and how we vary it, because you don't want everything to be, you want it to be repetitive, but you want to have variation too, I think. So it's interesting to look at. And this is an example of some of the strategy that we go through with our clients when we do things like logo. This strategy is not specifically only for the logo. The logo is often a starting point for us, where we start doing actual design work with clients on developing their initial brand pieces. So a lot of the strategy comes from the discussions that we have about the logo and learning about the business. But we take that information and we use it to develop the logo, and then also continue to extend it when we do things like business cards and websites. And yeah, the logo is a bit of a starting point for where we garner a lot of that information. We ask questions like, what does your organization do? What's the target audience? We don't always get a clear answer out of clients when we ask these questions, and I think that's okay, because a lot of the time people don't really think about these things. But it's a good starting point for, you know, the logo process is a good starting point for our clients to come in and actually start thinking about, yeah, who is my target audience? Who are my main competitors? And to look at what they're doing visually and how they can differentiate themselves from them. And then the second page there you see is kind of like a bit of a stylistic, it's a bit of a stylistic form to see what appeals to the client, but we also bear in mind what the target audience will want. You know, for classical versus modern, the first one on the list, it's just a sliding scale to see. The client might say, oh, I like things a bit more modern, so we, you know, put a tick on the 4. And then we know that, you know, the look they're going for is a bit more modern. They might use things that are a bit less detailed and more abstract, and so on and so forth. Mature versus youthful, those are, you know, those are important things to discover. Do you want your look to be appeal to a bit more of a mature audience or youthful? Same for masculine and feminine. And we just go through this whole list with them and kind of figure out where they would like to be, and look at where we think the target audience will be wanting to see, what will resonate with the target audience.
Hey, Peter, sorry to interrupt you here, but I got a question from the chat box.
Yeah.
So somebody's asking, what's up with the orange in the Ed's logo? And of course, I have a bit of an affiliation with an orange soccer team, but what does the orange represent in your opinion, and why does it work so well for us?
The real answer or the soccer answer?
No, the real answer.
Orange is very creative. It's a very creative color. We've had it for a long time too. So it's kind of one of those things that we've debated on switching out and adding different colors, but orange has kind of always been our color, but it was primarily chosen for it being a very creative color. You know, if people are coming to you as a design agency, as a marketing agency, they want creativity. They want something that's a bit fun and fresh. You know, it's not too masculine. It's not too feminine. It's a bit more neutral, but I think the big thing is that it's creative and it sparks inspiration, and it's a fun color. It's not as bland and boring as some other shades of colors. I mean, I think every color can be fun in its own right, but orange is just very fun, and I think people are looking for creativity, especially when they're coming to a company like ours. So that's why we selected orange.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent answer. But it's just an example of a color. There's a whole color science behind colors. There's a whole science behind typography, like which fonts you use. There's a lot of research being done, you know, in the branding area that we apply every day, just because we know it works. So if you come to us with your business and you explain what it is, we can actually make suggestions. And of course, we ask you, but like, which color do you absolutely hate? Because in the end, it's your logo, it's your business. But we can give you recommendations to say, like, okay, like you're in financial services, well, red may not be the best choice for you, but red is the color of danger. And when you talk about financial products, it's probably not the best color to use. But you know what? For every rule, there's always somebody that breaks those rules as well. So, and that's where the creativity comes in. But as a standard rule of thumb, we just kind of stick with the things that actually work. Yeah, Jeff. The Travelers Group is brought up, so I'm not sure what their color is, but they're probably fairly safe. Or they have a red color, yeah. So there's exceptions to every rule, right? Yeah. But we just believe that as a small business, you need to think these things through, and that's kind of what Peter is talking about and what we can help with.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, Peter. One of the rules I learned when studying graphic design was, in order to break the rules, you have to know them. So exactly. Definitely, there's rule breaking is a important part of being creative. But understanding the psychology behind the color selections and why you might not want to choose red for a financial group, right? I mean, it definitely can work, but there are things that you probably should think about. So how Edge creates your visual brand. We create concepts, logos, websites, print designs that are guided by our research and information and gathered in discussions with you. So I think that's important, is that we're not, we don't want to, I guess, set in stone what we think has to be your brand. It's a collaboration too, right? You have to stand behind whatever we put out for you. You have to be proud of it too. It's not solely, you know, the biggest portion is you want to appeal to your target market, and we'll always guide you in the best way to do that. But it's always a collaboration. We'll have back and forth discussions, figure out the research together. Yeah, and we base all of our design work, whatever it is, logos, websites, you name it, with the strategy first. So we think about these things that we discuss in our meetings. And then we look to you guys to provide feedback on concepts, right? We want to make sure that whatever we put out, you're proud of and you think looks awesome, because yeah, you do want to look awesome, right? I think everybody does. Everyone wants to have that awesome brand that looks really good on the side of a truck or on your website. So we're here to make you proud of what you're putting out to the public. We finalize the visual aspects and messaging and begin to implement them across all applications to start building brand recognition. So I think our goal is when we're working with clients, we don't want to, I guess, keep changing things up and putting out different branded pieces. We want everything to be in line. We want the logo to be in line with all the other visuals that you put out. We want your website to match your brochures, your business cards. We want everything, the messaging on everything should be consistent. Because ultimately that's what we're trying to help you do, is build brand recognition so your company stands out in its market, and people can start to associate the stuff that we might put out with all your other materials. Your website should be an extension of your brochure should be an extension of your look. Everything should match nicely together and look like a package.
Yeah, not very well said, Peter. We have about 15 minutes left here, less than. So I want to make sure we have some time for questions. Do we? Oh, we're at that point right now. Perfect timing. So yeah, we'll if somebody has a question for us right now, feel free to unmute yourself and optionally put on that video as well, but or just put it in the chat box, and we'll try to answer some of your more specific questions. I want to thank Peter and Katie for informing us about the areas they work in every day. This is not supposed to be a sales pitch for just the work that Edge is doing, but whoever you work with or however you're planning on moving forward with your business, these are just important things to keep in mind. So if you're informed about these things, you'll be in a better position to have an opinion and actually, be able to ask the correct questions. So branding does not have to be complicated. It just following some basic rules will really help you to create something that's really will work well for your company.
And just a note on that, Peter, a lot of these things are things that you can start thinking of without having to talk to us. Like it's good as a new business owner who's thinking about doing marketing to think about what kind of message you're putting on social media. Even a lot of people start putting social media posts out before they even have their, logos or brochures or websites done up, because it's easy and accessible. So you can start thinking about your own messaging and who you're appealing to and things like that. So.
Yeah, for sure. Good. This is where these painful moments of silence come in, but they always work.
Peter,
Hi, Linda.
What happens, or how is it best to address some organization as ourselves, the Bison Producers of Alberta? We are promoting the farming of bison. We are promoting the marketing of the bison meat and the animal. We're trying to give inroads to people that are new to the industry. We do have books and pamphlets and things like that are of help. Our logo shows a bison, but how do you extend the brand to different areas, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Yeah, very good question. So first of all, you're dealing with different audiences, right? And then some of the things we talked about is, of course, okay, like establish your audience. And then if you are lucky enough to have like a very, fine niche or a clearly defined audience, then you can kind of tailor to that. But what you bring up is actually like an additional challenge, I think, when it comes to branding your organization. If you have an internal audience, more or less, right, your members, and then you have the external audience. So my suggestion for you would be is to, and I think you're already doing this, is just to focus more on the external audience, more so than the people already know, like, and trust you, right? Because they want to recognize the logo, but it's not like they're already familiar with your organization. So I think your external audience may be almost more important in the case that you describe. Does that make any sense?
It does. So how would you accentuate the external audience with your branding versus your internal audience?
Yeah, so I'm not like in some cases it's what is called a brand extension, and maybe Peter, you can explain better what that means. But in some cases, you have large organizations, they have different divisions, and they use like wording, for example, as part of the logo to identify which department this is for. Like if you look at a company like General Electric, for example, right, like a huge organization, they have literally hundreds of brand extensions that use the same basic brand, but then they have an additional modifier that explained what that division is doing, like who they serve. So that's one way of dealing with that.
That makes sense.
Like in the education situation, right? If you look at the U of A or the U of C, they have oftentimes sports teams that have a different brand, right? And that's another way of dealing with it. Like you actually create brands specifically for your audience. Now, I think for most businesses, that's very tricky because as soon as you start generating multiple versions of your logo, first of all, your team may use the wrong logo at the wrong time. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Exactly, right? Like I think the Alberta Bison probably has several versions of the logo, correct? Or not?
Actually, we don't have several versions of our logo.
Okay.
But what we do have is, two different areas on our website. One is consumers and one is producers.
Yeah. No, I know, right? So yeah, I think again, going back to that example, it's a very real situation that you're dealing with, right? So it's slightly unique because you're having those different audiences. Mm-hmm. But I think one way of solving it is just to have the modifier. But again, like creating all different logos for different audiences, it gets pretty hard to manage, right? Peter or Katie, you guys have any ideas? Or go ahead, Linda, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, it also extends the expense of something. If you've just got one logo, you don't have to pay for a different or an extended logo to be on, for example, recipe cards.
Yes.
So it's worked for us to just have one. People know the BPA by that logo. But I was just curious about the extension of the branding and how that would work. And what you've said is very true.
Yeah. So that's one way of kind of dealing with it, especially if you have a large organization. But those organizations are very protective of their brand, right? So they want to be associated with the main brand, but then there's a way to
extend it.
Yeah, extend that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Peter.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the question.